Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you are here today. I have the honor and the pleasure of talking to Shaunda Holloway. Shaunda is a painter, a printmaker, a curator, and a writer. And I'm going to toss in there singer too, because I've seen Shaunda
Oh
do
man.
some performing. I've seen it. I've had the good pleasure of performing with Shaunda, so that was awesome.
Thank you.
She recently curated the Remember My Struggle KMeBR3 exhibition at Southern Connecticut State University as part of SCSU's 1619, a week of commemoration series. Holloway's writing has been published in Essence Magazine, the Connecticut Post, the Inner City News, the New Haven Review, Stand Our Ground, poems for Trayvon Martin and Marissa Alexander, and other publications. Her paintings have been exhibited um, throughout the world. So, Shaunda, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm so
Thank
glad. I'm
you.
so glad you're here. Um, so you have a wonderful website, and we're gonna show some of your beautiful work in just a moment. But I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about um, how you or just about your artistic journey, how you came to the kind of art that you do. You're a visual artist, but it's a very specific kind of printing that you do. Could you say, just educate me, because I don't
Okay.
know. Tell me
All
about it. What?
right.
Yeah.
Okay. um, so I started out before I got involved with printmaking, working with pastel. I used to work at an art supply store, and one of the people that I was working with suggested that I take a printmaking class.
Mm,
Um, Prior to that, I was working at the library, and there was a guy that I worked with who was an artist who was much older, and he would come upstairs with like stacks of books and oversized books because back then there was like this room downstairs in the bottom of the library. I was working at Ives Library,
mm,
and so his name was George. So he would, go into the stacks and come out with these huge books. And I worked in tech services, so he would come upstairs and just drop the books on my desk and be like, "Study these," and then he was like, "You need to take a class at CAW," and I was like, "CAW," you know. At the time, I was in college and everything, and I was like, "That's not a college." And he was like, "You know what? Just go there and just take a class." So my grandmother had asked me what I wanted for Christmas around that time, and I said, "Well, I want to take an art class." And she said, "An art class?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I think, at that age, I think she felt that I should have wanted some stuff, or that's probably what she would have expected. But I said, "Yeah, I want to take a class." So I went down to CAW and met a woman named Dottie who worked through the registrar, and she was like, fill out the application for the scholarship, and the rest is history. That's pretty much how my artistic journey began in my adult life. I always drew as a child, but as an adult it was like, just taking that one class. And I've taken printmaking with most of the printmaking educators over there at CAW, Tong, Barbara, Mora. I mean, there's really only like a couple people that I haven't taken classes with. And
mhm,
I find that I have gravitated more toward monotypes, which is more of a painterly uh, technique.
mhm,
Oftentimes, you would take a plexiglass plate and use brayers and ink it up and then wipe away, and then, uh, you put your paper or fabric on it and then roll it through the printing press. So I find that the immediacy of monotype speaks to me. Um, Sometimes I incorporate like wood cuts or collage and things like that in there. And the thing about printing is you could create something. I could create a print in 2021. Now 2025, I could go right back into it and be like, you know what? I want to add another layer, and I could do that. And
Mm.
with a painting, with a painting, you do a painting and you go back into it. You could just jack it up, you know, you know. I mean, that's the clean version. Like you could just
Yeah,
ruin a painting by just
sure.
going in there. But with the print, things can happen in such a subtle way that one extra mark, could just elevate the piece.
Yeah,
So
changes it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Have you, so it sounds like, have you done that? Have you done that before? You
oh
work
yeah,
something out and then go back and
all the
put more layers in?
time,
Yeah.
all the time, all the time, all the
Mm.
time, all the time. Um, you know, all the time. And what I love about that is that, you know, it's just not something that could be duplicated because you don't know how many layers are underneath there,
Sure.
and yeah, I love printmaking. And it's to me, you have when I first started printmaking, often some of the traditional printmakers were about registration and things being lined up and everything like
Yeah.
that. And I print in a very organic way. And, you know, that uniformity, I would not necessarily say that that's my strength. And I began to discover that I was really good at color and texture. So I
Mm.
decided to, put my foot on the gas and go with that, and really honor my particular strengths. It wasn't easy because you have these traditionalists like this is things should be this way or whatever,
Sure. Yeah.
and people that you admire, you don't necessarily want to disappoint, but then you have to say to yourself like, you know, what am I good at, and what am I trying to say, and
Mm.
how can I shine? How can the work speak for itself? And
Yeah.
when you try to do something someone else's way, your work usually suffers, and you do
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I love that. I love that framing. To me, it's like, it's like you have your own special kind of like medicine for the people, right? And if you're busy trying to, like copy someone else's, then you never actually get to develop your own
Exactly.
perspective, your own. I mean, I'm using
Exactly.
the word medicine because
Right.
I think art is so healing, not only
Right.
for the artist but for us that get to
Exactly.
experience it.
Any form of the arts, for sure, definitely. And it's interesting too because I think that early on, there are people whose work I found that I admired, and I could see where um you know trying to get yourself up to a level of okay, I could see the difference in your work. Sometimes you may try to like, well, let me imitate such and such, and then you're
Sure.
just like, oh God, no.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
get that reality, and it's something, they say imitation is the highest form of flattery, but really, to artists one-on-one, it's not really, because we're looking, I mean, it's one thing to be influenced by somebody, in an
Right.
organic way, but to overtly copy is really an insult. It's like, if
Yeah.
I make the cake, and I'm like, you know, let me add some sugar, let me add some cinnamon, let me add some
Right.
nutmeg, right? And I bake this cake, and you're sitting there watching all my ingredients, and then you go out and you bake, you bake the same cake. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? You don't try to make it different. I'm like, oh my God. Next minute my cake is in the store. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when you take some ingredient and you make it your own, now it's like I see, you got your cakes out there, and I'm like, that's what's up. You did your own thing with it. Now I want to buy one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. That.
originality is something. Hmm.
Yeah. No. No, I was just going to agree with
Yeah,
you that difference between being inspired or influenced by somebody
yeah,
and then copying somebody is an important distinction, because I think, like, as an artist, there are so many other artists that I love and that I'm totally inspired by. And sometimes, if I'm being all the way honest, like, sometimes get a little frustrated with myself when like I hear something from another artist and I want to do that thing, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because I
Yeah.
just love it. I love the way, I love the
Yeah.
sound, or the way they're putting something together,
Mm-hmm.
but then quickly discover that like actually that's
Yeah.
not my medicine.
Right, 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 right.
That's their
Exactly.
medicine. Yeah.
Exactly. 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 And also, I mean, you don't want to overthink things, but you really have to be careful with subconscious because, you know, it sometimes you could absorb something on a subconscious level, and then you're like, you have to really filter yourself to make sure that you're doing your work,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. I really like that, because there's also like there's something about like point of view, right?
Yeah.
Is this really my point of view, or am I just accepting something from somewhere else that just like
Right.
actually doesn't belong to me?
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, that's great. Thank you. Um, so Shaunda, so I want to show a little bit of your work,
Sure.
because I think it'll help with this next question. Um, so let me go ahead and see if I can just pull this up. Here we go, right here, and share. Okay. All right. Can y'all see this? All right. So Shaunda, this is your website.
Mhm.
And there's some beautiful, I just love what you're talking about with these layers, and this imagery just feels so rich to me, and powerful. um this one this one here, um I don't know, there's just like the action here, the movement, like this collection of colors, is just really cool with this face in the center here. Um, so here's my question, and it's not
Uh-huh.
about this particular piece of work, but just general. Um,
Mhm.
how, like, what values in yourself do
Mhm.
you see reflected in your own work?
Well, I would say that um, I value, uh, you know, you you want to see. Uh, I think most people want to see themselves depicted in a positive way, and um, everybody's human, everybody's fallible. At the same time, um, I would say I consider myself a storyteller, and I feel like an intrinsic duty to tell uh, the other story when it comes to uh, uh, Black culture, if you will. And so I feel like, you know, I used to go to my grandmother's house and go to her, and I would be in her bathroom, and she would have all these Jet magazines in there.
Mm,
And it was like the highlight of visiting her, getting the courage to ask her for one of her Jets. And then if she felt generous and she gave you like two or three, you felt like you just struck gold. And
yeah.
I mean, it was just like everything to me. And so I draw inspiration from uh, being in that bathroom and seeing the images depicted in there. You had everything in there. You had facts about who did what when. You had your beauty of the week. You had your photo of the week. I mean, it was a dignified publication, and to bring dignity, you know, to the African American Black culture, diasporan culture, and to the world, um, through the means that the channels that I use. That's what's important to me. So, um, I just want to put that out there. Like that's very important because I mean, you see so many other different types of images, and um, you know, creativity is not limited. People can express themselves however they want to, but at the end of the day, um, you know, I see so many other images, and I want people to see themselves in a way that's like,
Hmm.
wow, we did that, we do that. Oh, okay,
Hmm.
that's me, you know. And
Yeah.
recently, when I did the exhibition at CAW, Made Visible, you know, when we were hanging some of the pieces, uh, there's a guy in a wheelchair, and he was like, "Oh wow, this is good." He was like, he was African American, and he was like, "Wow," he was like, "Yeah, black people in," and, and it was
Yeah.
like Audubon Street and stuff like that, and so the work was doing what it was supposed to do, and it was, to me, from what I could see, it was deeper than just seeing himself. It was also like beautiful images,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it was good. It was good. It was really good. It was him and some friends, and we hadn't even finished putting the work up all together, And so to
Hmm.
get that kind of response, yeah,
Yeah.
dignity, yeah, dignity.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, Shaunda, thank you for that. I'm just thinking now about the importance of representation and seeing images that reflect the real richness of a culture, which is very much what I see in your work. I
Yeah,
definitely see myself reflected. I definitely can connect to the work on a very I say on a much deeper level because I see I see my aunties here. I see I see myself here. I see
excellent.
my friends and my neighbors, and I don't always see that in the kinds of art that that is in other places. So just really appreciating that. Um, before I take this off the screen, is there a particular piece that that is speaking to you now that you could say a little bit about?
Um, well, basically, they're so the one on the right in tune, uh, the one well, it's on my right, but the one that you showed earlier,
Yeah.
um, it the person that I photographed, her name is Sarah, and she is someone who is very very natural, sort of earthy, organic person, and I feel like this image depicts her to the max, and
Mm,
and not just her physicality, but just sort of her spirit and her interconnection with the natural world, and you know, living in a city is a cool thing, but at the same time, it's like, one of the things I try to sneak in my pieces, work, is the connection to nature itself.
hmm.
And so, I feel like this piece, uh, in tune, she is in tune, and
Mm,
it just shows the power of being connected to the environment. And that's another piece to the work. uh, I used a lot of recycled materials and a lot of different things. The
mm,
uh, the fabric that I printed this image on is actually bamboo. So I don't try to make the work preach to you, but I'm from the Smokey the Bear era. You know what I mean? So I'm
I
just like, and
do.
grew up in the projects, and um, just to see things talked about on a lawn and stuff, just like sometimes blight can impact your psyche. And so,
Oh yeah.
I try to, like, show people, like, how amazing things can be if they're transformed, and
Mm,
and to not see yourself as separate from the environment, like, you know, it's like, I don't know, I just feel a certain responsibility to that. And I feel like,
yeah.
I will carry a popsicle stick for miles, what I mean? Like, I just can't drop it. And
Yeah.
on some levels, seeing what I saw, I would have every right to, on a default level, just because people do it. That's, to do things the way people do.
Sure.
Um, but I try to incorporate that, in my work.
Mm,
Because
yeah.
that the planet is something that belongs to all of us, and we're responsible for preserving it. You know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I see. I can see that and connect with that too. It's just like also reminds me of the way, like one of the ways in which your values sort of show up in your work, even if it's subtle. Like I may not be able to look at this piece and know that it's printed on bamboo, but the fact that is a part of how you think about your work, from an environmental perspective, and kind of recycling and using the things that are in your environment to create something beautiful, I think is incredible. um, you said something a minute ago that caught my ear, and I want to ask you about it. You used the word transformation or transform,
Mm-hmm.
and I wonder how you think about that with reference to yourself, because I'm just thinking, you said you started to pursue this art
Mm-hmm.
um, as an adult, and I wonder like how this notion of transformation um, kind of lives in your life,
Mm-hmm.
going from where you were to sort of saying like, actually, you know what, I want to pursue, I'm interested in this art, I want to pursue it, and I want to do it. um, Lots of folks don't have the courage for that, Shaunda, so I'm wondering how
Okay.
you see that in your life.
Well, I tell you something. When I was at Southern, and I found my major was journalism, and I found myself hanging out with everybody in the art department, with quite a few people, and they were the people that you saw with books. You know, sometimes you're in college, but you don't necessarily see people carrying books. They were like they were thinkers, and not that the other population wasn't, but they were like thinking on this level that it was like the conversations we had, caught my attention.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just felt like I had something to say. I didn't know how to go about it, because I wouldn't necessarily say I drew in a photorealistic way. So it was sort of like, hmm, you know, I just knew I had something to say, and just hanging out with all the people in the art department, seeing what they were doing, and just seeing like this, they have this, like, I don't know, this freedom that
Mm,
I admired. They just
yeah.
own who they were as, people and as creatives. And I admire that. And, you know, um, that's, that was a spark for me. And then, meeting, working with George in the library. And it's sort of like a piece of charcoal. Like, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to get started, but once you light it, it's like hot. You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
red. And
Yeah.
and so once I lit the coals, to create, it was on and popping, because
Yeah.
it's like I have a burning desire to create. Um,
Mm,
as I create, I've learned that what my purpose is, and my purpose is I am here to create, and on many levels. And the hardest thing was to speak of transformation, giving myself permission to create, because most people knew me as a
mm,
writer, and I was, some of my closest friends were like, I like your art, I mean, but I love your writing. And so that some of the work wasn't where it obviously wasn't where it is today. And looking back, I can understand the encouragement to do what appeared to be the strongest thing. But I still had something to say, and I'm so glad I listened to myself, and
Yeah.
just kept with it.
Mm.
And a lot of times people who are creative, who have multiple abilities or multiple interests, are encouraged to just stick with one thing. you know
Yes. Yep.
and for some people that's just not possible.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I just can't do it. What I mean? I just cannot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm okay
Can
with
you?
that.
Yeah, I am too, and I'm
Hmm.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad you're doing all the things because I
Yeah.
think, yeah, like
Hmm.
first off, like why not?
Right.
But also, um, yeah, this desire that you're talking about, like this, like I have something to say. It's in there, and I gotta let it out. Can
Hmm.
you? Because I don't know that everyone either like has that feeling or like recognizes when they do have it. Could
Hmm.
you describe a little bit about like what that feels like for you? And I mean
Hmm.
like in your body, like that
In my body.
is,
Okay.
yeah, like
All
is there
right.
a, yeah,
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Well, I'm telling you something. Like, you have to be aware of how you feel when you are stimulated uh spiritually, because art is a spiritual process for me anyway. Like, and most artists, like, it's not something that's outside of you. It's not it's not like, parts are sold separately. No, that's inside. And I think about when I was a child. I had a big sister from the United Way, and I thought this woman was like the wealthiest person on the planet, because when
Mm,
I went to her house, I would color and she would have neon crayons, and you know, you had the primary set. You know what I mean?
yeah.
I had never
Yeah.
seen anybody that had like neon. You had your
Hmm.
primaries in there, but you had these pastels in there, and some are so bright, and you're like, wow, this is like so cool. And she
Yeah.
would take me to the Yale Art Gallery and the Peabody Museum, and I remember, like, somehow or another, she had taken some photographs of me, and of all the photographs that I had ever taken had been taken of me as a child, the happiest photographs I ever remember of her taking photographs of me in the museum. And that told
Mm,
me a lot.
yeah.
And so, I don't even have record of them. They're lost somewhere. Uh, but it stayed in my mind, and so there's evidence of, you know, what raises your frequency.
Hmm. Yeah.
And when you go to a poetry reading and something stirs you,
Hmm.
and your grandmother comes out of you, you're like, amen. It's like, I mean, I went to this poetry reading in Brooklyn, and I was like trying to repress, my because my grandmother used to
Yeah.
go to this church called New Hope, and she and the Reverend, like, I mean, like, she just was in sync with his whatever his truth was, whatever he had to say. And
Yeah.
he would say, like, in Jonah, and she'd be like, my Lord. I mean, her hand would go up instantly. And so I found myself in Brooklyn at the poetry reading, and the girl was talking. I was like, tell it. I was like, oh my God,
Yes.
it's her.
It's her.
So you have to be aware of like what speaks to you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
so I'm sure if you go somewhere and somebody is playing a certain rhythm, you're like, and it speaks to you, and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, and you
Yeah.
connect with it. You know what I mean? So these are the things that give you. This is the evidence. That's the
Yeah.
forensics of what you should be doing. You know,
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
what it is.
I love that. The forensics of what you should be doing. Yeah. It's so much, so there's so much wisdom embedded in our bodies. In our sort of, like our bodies know before our brains do oftentimes, and
Mm-hmm.
your body is like, yeah, yeah, you're in the right place.
Yeah.
Because you're right, like for me, hearing those rhythms, um they're the way that it shows up is like I can actually feel the rhythm like moving my body without me wanting to move, right? Like there's
Right.
something,
Right. Right. Right.
it's
Right.
like it's
Right.
in the shoulders, I get a little
Exactly.
something, I'm
Exactly.
like, oh, what
Exactly.
what is that? What are we
Exactly.
what are we doing? Yeah. So that, and that
It's
part,
true.
and there's this other piece too about like, I don't always feel curious,
Hmm.
but when I'm involved in music, or when I'm hearing, a drummer that I really love, I'm immediately like, oh, what is that? What's that sound like? Like, how do they do that? Like, what's the thing happening there that gets that sound, or gets that, what I become really curious, and I recognize that about myself. So first it's that little shoulder bop, and then it's like, what is going on in there? And that's
Yeah.
how I know I'm hooked.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
In creativity, is like is a body in itself, and it has to be fed. You know,
yeah,
I mean, like
yeah,
there are people I talk to all the time about creativity, and they say, "Oh, I haven't painted in a while, and I haven't written in a while," and a lot of artists will tell you like going to a museum and being visually stimulated is just as important as painting, you
yeah,
know and not necessarily because you want to like not because you want to copy somebody's work, but because you 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 need to be visually stimulated, you know
yeah.
I mean, if writers will tell you, you want to write well, read.
Read.
You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. And it's like, say for instance, watercolors, they come in these little cakes. And some are in cakes, some are in tubes. But let's talk about the cakes, right? So you got these cakes and they have, these colors and they're really beautiful and everything. They're dried. But you will never have any idea how beautiful they are until you dip your paintbrush in water and wet
Yeah.
the cakes. And then when you wet those cakes, you're like, oh my God, that's so beautiful. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's,
Yeah.
and that's what it is. It just can't be dormant. You have to feed it.
You got to
It's
feed
like
it.
yeah, sometimes your creativity is anorexic. And you just
Mhm.
like, you
Yeah.
gotta like open wide,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
yeah,
practice. It's
yeah.
a practice. And yeah, it's so interesting because the man, the, the practice of it, um, in some ways, in a lot of ways, I think, is the art, right? Like
Hmm.
that
Exactly.
piece,
Exactly.
that's the actual art.
Hmm.
It's like when you're doing it, or painting it, or designing
Yeah.
it, or doing the thing, like that's when the art is happening. Once it's done, it's like
Hmm.
that's the product,
Right.
like, and
Right.
that, that goes out, or like, not even to use like that
Exactly.
language of product, like it's to be
No,
bought
but
and
I
sold,
get
but
what
like,
you're saying. I
but
get.
that's the thing, like you got
Yeah.
the thing, right? But
Yeah.
that's not the actual art. That's what
Right.
happened
As a
because
result.
of the art. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I want to add to that and say, in the beginning, just to say that I was an artist, I was trying to like crank out stuff, crank out stuff, crank out stuff.
Yeah.
But when I
Right.
realized that, you know what, this ain't done, and I went back into the piece. Now you're talking transformation because it's like now I'm like I'm not quick to put out something just to say I've done it. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Because if you do that, you have like eliminated the whole process. And like you
Hmm.
said, which is the art. So you're absolutely right. And I'm so grateful for that type of for the growth and maturing and really not trying to prove anything, like, oh, let me hurry up and do this. Let me get this done. Let me do another paint, like, you
Yeah.
know, productivity, yes, but like manufacturing, then I just put my finger on the button and just, press copy. So the
Mhm.
process is very important, and it's a wonderful, wonderful feeling to get to the point where you can look back at something and say, this is not complete, or this needs
Yeah.
improvement. You know what I mean? And you're
I
self-editing
do.
in a way that is not it's not like depreciating what you do, but you're mature enough to own the fact that there's still some work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
That's like that's here, to be at that place,
Hmm.
because a lot of people crank out stuff, and I used to be one of those people, and it's like, here's my piece, here's my piece, here's my piece, here's my piece, and where was the time in this?
Mm-hmm.
What did you
Mm-hmm.
invest in? I mean, every now and then you crank out some pieces that just come to you, but that whole process, of just getting the enjoyment of it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let me erase that, let me add a little line,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I could,
Yeah.
I
It rem
could be
it
long winded
reminds
about creativity.
Yeah, no, no, this is great. But that's what this space is for. It reminds me a little bit of when you were saying, you got to feed that curiosity, you got to
Mhm.
feed that creativity, right? So like, writers are encouraged to read a bunch, and visual artists are encouraged to like go to museums and take in art. And I think the same is true like musicians,
Mhm.
you can like listen to the greats,
Right,
listen to not the greats, like listen to
right,
everything, take it all in and
exactly.
see how it moves you. What that reminds me of is how much um like art is like a language
Hmm.
by itself, because like, when you're learning a language, and even after you know a language, it's like practicing it. If you don't speak the language for a long time, you start to lose it.
True.
And so that reminds me of like this staying in the practice idea of as you learn, and you got to continue to feed it and practice it and work
Hmm.
at it,
Hmm.
and then it continues to evolve over time. Like the way that I use language today is very different from the way that I used language, when I was 20.
Hmm.
And so like it continues to evolve, even though I'm still speaking English.
Hmm.
um it's just very, very different.
Right.
And I can also, like you're saying, have the maturity to recognize that in myself, and that I'm still kind of honing and working out the way that I want to be in the world, or communicate in the world, or be understood in the world.
Right.
That feels powerful. um Shaunda, I'm wondering about some of your influences. You had mentioned a couple of people already. George and your grandmother certainly seem like
Hmm.
some pretty big influences. But I'm wondering what other influences you have, people or art or other things that have influenced your thinking and your art.
Hmm. That's a big question. um, I'm influenced by a multitude of things, people, and places. I am influenced by photography, music. There's a lot of different things, and so you know, most of the time when someone asks you who your influence is, you think of all these, big name artists and things like that. I can also say, at the nucleus, uh, my mother was a very creative person.
Mm,
She could transform anything. And I remember, when people were wearing cut up t shirts, she had like a line out the door. She just was cutting people's t shirts so quickly, and people were like, cut up a t shirt. And she was doing this for free, she wasn't even charging
wow.
people. And it was like, wow, and,
Wow.
she just had this unique ability to, just make things more beautiful. Uh, and my mom's sister, my youngest aunt, she was the first female bricklayer in the state of Connecticut,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, she didn't like me talking about it, but it's true. So the building on the corner of Whitney and Grove, when I walk by there, I'm just like, this is history. So she
Wow.
definitely influenced me because I spent a lot of time with her. She was that designated. She was that family babysitter. I was at her house all the time, and
Yeah.
so to see my aunt on the side of a building, like to see her on the scaffold was like, and sometimes she would see me before I would see her. She'd be way up in the air, and she'd be
Mhm.
like, Shauna, and she would have a little pink scarf on, and I'd be like, hi, so
Yeah.
it was definitely my father's brother, my uncle Tobe, he was a painter. Um, you know, uh to go in my grandmother's house and see those paintings that will rival anything you've seen in the masters,
Mhm.
just the bomb, just powerful. Um and my mother's baby brother, uh, he someone that was just a martial arts expert, you know,
Mhm.
really, you know, I remember like when he was very young, he was very into Bruce Lee and stuff like that. And I remember how he would like, you know, he was just a ball of energy. He'd be running down my grandmother's steps and boxing and things like that. And he just was like just so dynamic.
Yeah.
And so, when I look around me, there I think about like so many people that just so many information that comes at you. You know what I mean? Uh, you know, my cousin's father, my aunt that became the bricklayer, her children's father, he had the voice that you could hear from the bottom of the hill to the top.
Mm.
So I can say there was a lot of creative people around me who, um, you know, either directly or indirectly, made an impression.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely. Hmm.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I don't your aunt with the pink scarf is like on a scaffold. It's an image I'm gonna just carry with me now every time I walk.
Yeah,
Time
I
I walk
mean,
past
yeah.
that building, I'll be like,
Yeah,
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 there you
and
go.
yeah, and she was the first person. She was the first muralist I ever met. Like I remember, I'm 4 years older than her oldest son, her oldest. She has two, and so I remember she painted like Snoopy on the wall, and Snoopy was like on top of the doghouse, and you know, I just didn't see anybody who had any type of murals like that in any other
Mm,
homes in the neighborhood that I had been in. And
yeah.
it was like, okay, this is next level.
Hmm.
And it was, it wasn't no tiny Snoopy. It was like, Snoopy had a big dog house. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So, those things stick with you,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely.
Mm. Yeah, I see that. I see that that legacy, I think, in your work, particularly at least for me, the kind of um the focus on the kind of cultural representation as interpreted through your eyes. It feels really, really powerful, while also being um like just so inviting, really like feeling connected to the work as soon as I see it. It's like, oh yeah, like
That's
this
good.
is,
Thank you so much. That's quite a compliment. Thank you.
yeah, it's that like, oh, this feels familiar, like but not in a way that's like, oh, I've seen this before, but in a way that's like it makes sense. Like I see it
Hmm.
and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I can connect to that.
Hmm.
I know how to make that connection. It feels good to me.
Hmm.
And warm too. There's
Yeah.
a warmth
Yeah.
to your work that I, I
Thank you
I
very
I
much.
appreciate when I see it. Yeah. Um, yeah, and it's distinctive too, because I always can pick out one of your pieces. I remember I was in what's the restaurant, the vegan Ninth Square
Oh
Market.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and I looked up and I didn't look at the name or anything. I saw the
yeah.
piece and I was like, oh, I know who did that. I
Yeah.
know who's that. And then
Thank you so
I
much.
saw your name at the bottom, whatever, and I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I love
that's
them. I'm so glad that they're here. And, I just wanted to say that I'm very grateful for the collaborative spirit in New Haven. Like I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of different people on a lot of different levels. And, um, I think I asked them if I could have my work in there, and they were like, "Cool." And I mean, we would if I had an exhibition, they would cater. So it's
that's
like
lovely.
I just yeah, there are people in New Haven that if I say, "Well, let's work on this," or let's say, "Shaunda, you want to work on this," and there's that collaborative spirit, and I find that doors open so much more quickly for people working together than trying to do something on a solo. You know,
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah,
I'm cool with a solo exhibition, but at the same time, it's like my life and my being as a person has expanded, you know, through working with other people. You
yeah,
know, And it spans me because you know um, I spend a lot of time alone, and so you need to go
Mhm.
outside. Those muscles need to expand and contract. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
you can get up in doing things a certain way, having things done a certain way, and all this kind of stuff. But you really need to be able to like expand,
Yeah.
and remain flexible. And I mean, I'm the collaboration
Mhm.
queen. I love it.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I'm like down so much, like so many times. There's very few times where I'm like, I don't know if I want to, collaborate with this one or whatever. But it's very few. But most of the
Yeah.
time, I mean, if people are willing to push themselves, I'm willing to push myself. And the sky's the limit. Well, there is
Mm.
no limit, as far as I'm concerned.
There you go. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah.
There is no limit. I know that's right. I know that's right.
Hmm.
Well, Shaunda, just like that, we look up and here we are. We're we're close to the finish here.
Okay.
Um, but I do have one more question.
Okay.
And it's sort of like a catch-all question I ask everybody. And the
Hmm.
question is, what didn't I ask you that I should have asked you?
Hmm. Well, why do I keep on going?
Yes. So Shaunda, tell me,
Why do I keep on?
why do you keep on going? Why do you do this?
Why do I do it? Well, you know what? I do it because, um, it's my reason for being. And also, making art had taught me endurance. You know, you'll hear people. I have been walked through the ruins, talking to people about how you can't make a living as an artist. I mean, I had a conversation with somebody that they went back. I'm talking
Mm,
like way back, and
yeah.
and pretty much described, you know, how artists are just destined to live in squalor or whatever. And
Hmm.
I I say to that, the artists of yesteryear didn't have modern technology.
Hmm.
And so um, the financial piece is not where I want it to be, but I have learned to uh, be around people who I can learn from, be around
Yeah.
people who understand economics, be a student, be willing if someone says, look into XYZ, do that,
Hmm. Yeah.
and I mentioned that thing uh, about being walked through the ruins to express the hurdles, because if you have a respect for somebody who has been financially stable and flourishing, it would be easy to take that in and just say, well,
Mm,
you know what I
yeah.
mean? And
Hmm.
so the real thing is to jump over that.
Hmm.
That's like that takes
Yeah.
heart to
It does,
overcome that type of discouragement.
for sure.
And when it can be well intentioned, you know what
Hmm.
I mean?
Most times it is.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that's like number one.
Yeah.
um and I feel like my grandmothers both told me, your time will come.
Mm,
And that's part of the reason why you know I've never even been in the room with them at the same time, but they both told me those same words in the same way.
yeah.
And so beside outside of the desire to create, but just knowing that these two women who were solid, said
Hmm.
that to me, I'm like,
Yeah.
I know, and I really want to be able to be at a point where I can, uh, have more of a financial uh, benefit from my work.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm constantly learning. I have a friend, we've been friends since childhood. She bought her first house at like 18, 19 years old. And so,
Wow.
when I was in college, I'd be like, I'll be back. I'm going to my friend's house. I really was at my friend's house, you know? And so I'm
Right.
still learning from her today. She still sends me information her brother has a thriving business. And so I'm listening, I'm listening and asking questions. Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. There's that curiosity again. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's imperative if you are going to overcome not being where you want to be financially. Yeah. Yeah.
Shaunda, thank you so much. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
coming. Thank you for sharing. This has been just such a wonderful conversation. I really,
Thank
really
you.
appreciate your
You're welcome.
your work and you coming on. And I'm 100% confident that somebody is going to watch this and be so inspired by you and your work. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Can't say it enough. Really, really
Thank
appreciate
you.
you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day. I appreciate it.
You too, Shaunda.
All
Be
right.
well. We'll be talking
Super.
soon, I'm sure.
Excellent.
I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
come get a piece. I'm getting a piece.
All right, cool. Get it down. Thank you so much. Have a
All
good
right.
day. All right.
Be well.
Bye now.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Celeste.
Very, very nice.
Yeah. So we'll talk to you soon. I gotta jump on another call. So
Bye bye.